This is Dr. Paul, and welcome back. I have promised you for a while that I would follow up my talk on the Zeus instinct with a talk about the analogous female instinct, the Hera instinct. And we covered a lot last time. I see a lot of people joining in right away here. Feel free to pose questions. They're a little bit difficult to track on this format, but I will try. Um, let's see, there's a lot to talk about this time. Um, Last time when we talked about the Zeus instinct, the male analogous instinct to the Hera instinct that I've talked about since around 20, 2009, something like that, and done a lot of courses about all these instincts. Um, I I like tapping a little bit into Carl Jung and Jungianism, Jungian analysis, just for the reason that he was so literary and liked finding psychological lessons within literature. And my way of looking at, I think, one of his highest values is the notion that if a story lasts hundreds of years or thousands of years, there must be something universal about that story in terms of human behavior that people of any culture in any time period in history can recognize something about themselves in it. And if we look to the model that I think is the master model of psychology, even though many others disagree, and it was disproven neuroanatomically. I'm not into neuroanatomy in this regard, I'm into psychology. It's the triune brain model. So I always like grouping aspects of behavior into that which is reptilian minded, let's say, which is instinctual, or Freud simply called it the unconscious. The emotions, obviously, the mammalian brain, not the actual brain, but the mind, the aspect of the emotions in the mind. And then the higher brain of humans, and perhaps some other primates in terms of executive function, the conscious mind, the fully conscious mind is how I view the higher brain. So what we're talking about here is purely in the reptilian mind, if you will, the area of the unconscious and the instincts. And both Freud and Jung talked about the unconscious in their own unique ways and their own nomenclature. Um, One of the big, um, up until maybe recent years, controversial areas of psychology would be to talk about males and females as different in some way. And it's very clear they're not different at all in terms of executive function, the conscious mind. They're not different at all in terms of IQ, IQ level, career potential, learning, experience, and what you draw from that. Both males and females are obviously equal in that area, but they're also equal in emotional range. Now, how they express their emotions might be very, very different, as influenced by the instincts underneath that in the unconscious. But down in the reptilian mind, uh, in the unconscious arena, where the instincts exist, where several other things also exist, um, unconscious beliefs that you've taken on, things that are running in the background that you're not consciously thinking of, but they guide your behavior and your decisions. Um, Today, that can even amount to political party, um, what peer group you fall into, what culture you were raised in. Culture can influence this, but is not the same as it. And then the ego defenses, especially the primitive and immature ones, are largely unconscious. So I like to think of development and developmental level in a psychoanalytic way in terms of how we personally evolve as we go through our life story and as we learn socially. and intellectually as well, we learn how to behave. We learn how to relate to others. And at some point, we learn what maturity is and character virtue, as contraposed against its opposite, which is childishness and narcissism by degrees. So back to Zeus and then Hera and Carl Jung. One of the things that attracted me to the Greek pantheon, or its equivalent, the Roman pantheon, is that I'm well versed at it, and so I can talk about it, and it makes sense to me um, in my own language. But you could just as easily use ancient Chinese mythology or ancient Hindu mythology and find the exact same principles within, and the same analogous, let's call them deities. And by referring to deities, I'm not at all referring to worship or religion or things like this. It's that in a Jungian kind of way, these literary figures depicted as deities represent something very, very powerful within humans, within us. And then if you join that to the ideas of Darwin, um, the easiest one to explain is the master equation of his is that evolution amounts to creatures and a species in its entirety managing to survive long enough to reproduce. So we have two variables in that equation then, what I would call a survival variable and then a reproductive variable. The survival variable would encompass that which is common to both males and females in terms of um, needing to um, react immediately without having to think consciously. It's an unconscious or reflex reaction to that which threatens our survival. In the arena of traumatology, you might say that's the original definition of psychological trauma and PTSD was witnessing or being party to a life-threatening situation, such as being in the military or being victim of a hurricane, tornado, earthquake, or some other life-threatening act of nature. Males and females will tend to respond the same. You run, you evade, the fight or flight reflex takes place. Males and females are the same in that variable. However, in the reproductive variable, the need to reproduce, beginning with, for humans, initially attracting another person, then eventually dating, evaluating the person, seeing if there's a fit, becoming aligned, pair bonded, to use scientific terminology, boyfriend, girlfriend in ordinary parlance. And then eventually, as humans, deciding culturally, do we commit? Do we sign a contract, essentially, and make vows that we are going to be together for life? That is a huge undertaking for anybody. And there's recent research about how long does it take for people to overcome a breakup after they have been bonded and um, attached to another person. And the answer was approximately 8 years, that a person is half done with a significant attachment, loosening themselves from that after 4 years. And so 8 years on average is the length of time. And aspects of it can go on beyond that, where the person still feels some attachment feelings. And when that study came out, it was highlighted today, actually, by Chris Williamson on X, on Twitter, the study. And I posted that, by the way, if you want to look for it. It's very interesting because that immediately reminded me of Konrad Lorenz and his ducklings. The ethologist you probably overlooked in high school when you learned about a thing called imprinting that he discovered, imprinting. And there's several kinds of imprinting, but attachment is one of them. Bonding is another one. So Konrad Lorenz's famous quote was, imprinting is forever. And what was unique about him and this idea of imprinting was, to my mind, it's almost like firmware that comes within a computer when it arrives at your door, but you have to turn it on. You have to turn the computer on, and then the firmware starts installing itself. That's imprinting. It's like an instinct that is turned on, but only under two conditions. It has to be the right conditions and the right timing. And you may recall that Konrad Lorenz was walking through a field in his family's farm in Austria, and a group of ducklings started following him. And in his words, thought he was their mother. And it was simply because they were at the right stage of development when a moving creature walked through, which was him, and the instinct turned on. The instinct to follow a mother turned on, but was attached to him. So when he says imprinting is forever, that's his famous quote. That is the explanation, to my mind, for um, the eternal memory of your first love. It's like Romeo and Juliet, and you never forget your first love because of that imprinting phenomenon. Imprinting is forever. So if it takes 8 years plus for people to loosen themselves psychologically from an attachment, that's no surprise to me because of Konrad Lorenz. But back to Zeus and Hera. When I talked about Zeus as our first example of these masculine and feminine instincts, as I've called them since 2009, I referred to a friend and colleague of mine, John Barry, and his colleague, Martin Seeger, who've studied male behavior specifically in this case, and they've unearthed, not really unearthed, but made a psychological proof, let's say, of what we already know as men to be the first three instincts of masculinity. Now, he calls them archetypes just like Jung did, but they're instincts, essentially. We might as well use that word. And the first one was to be a provider and protector. So males have this inborn, innate, unconscious, instinctual, automatic response to want to be a protector of women that they care for, whether it's a sister, mother, lover, wife, girlfriend, as well as to provide to them, which is explanatory also of why males tend to want to be the larger breadwinner in terms of income in a relationship. They feel best when they at least are providing a little bit more, at least a little bit more, than the female in the relationship, in a heterosexual relationship. And the same has been shown to be true in terms of at least sociological, aka polling data, of what would women prefer in relationships, in um, exclusive dating or a committed relationship. They would prefer that the male make more than them, even though males are going to college less and less and staying in the workforce less and less, which is becoming more and more of a problem in dating and people getting together in the first place. But even though I refer a lot to dating, attraction, relationships, courtship, um, my life's work being developing a model of human courtship that makes sense. This principle of Darwin's does not just apply to the area of romance. It applies to just behavior in general. Behaviors in a male, behaviors in a female, on average, on a bell curve in general. So back to Zeus and Hera and the Greeks. One of the reasons that I think Greek literature and myth is so valuable and useful to tap, just like Jung definitely was on to this concept, but he explored all human folklore. Um, trying to tap it for psychological principles based on what I told you, is that Zeus and Hera, at least literarily, are married. And also, you might think quite strange, they happen to be brother and sister as well. Um, I don't take that literally. I think it's a familial connection that is being made in those myths. Both Zeus and Hera were the offspring of Rhea and Kronos, the Titans. And the Titans were eventually overthrown by the Olympians. Okay. What I think that symbolizes is simply that uh, parents age and become weaker and eventually pass on, and the children are the new generation. So they take on the power. That's all that means, I think, psychologically. But the connection between Zeus and Hera as husband and wife, or whether you want to see them as brother or and sister, I don't think matters as a point of contention or a strange connection. It's simply that in the literary fashion, they are analogous to each other. They do similar tasks. They have similar powers, but one is male and one is female. That's all it means. And what's fascinating about Greek myth is as you go through the stories within the Greek myths, every time you encounter a brother and sister, a husband and wife, um, a mother and son, there is this familial connection that is implying to you a phenomenologic observation of behavior over centuries and even millennia that is the same every time, and therefore is a universal, biologically programmed, built into us instinctually. Okay. So we covered Zeus as John Barry's proven and Martin Seeger's proven uh, male, they call them archetype. I would call it instinctual tendency toward being a provider protector. Hera, being the wife of Zeus, is equivalent to him in power. She is the twin godhead of Mount Olympus. She is the female CEO. He's the male CEO. They are co CEOs. They are also parents, um, but they are also husband and wife. They're also brother and sister. So everything about Hera has similar level of power and similar um, providing, protecting aspects, only in a feminine instinctual tendency. That's the point. Also, I want to make a point about Carl Jung, where I vigorously disagree with an idea of Carl Jung's, and that is the idea of the anima and the animus. I don't think they're real. I think I think it's noise. It's an overlay of something different from the instincts, what he called archetypes. I think it's emotional. I think it's mammalian brained. And here's what I mean by that. And I don't want to go off too into the weeds on this, but I want to make a point. Um, it, we're talking about the reptilian mind here in talking about instincts. But if we went into the mammalian mind, the emotions, where males and females have equivalent range of emotion, they express them differently, but equivalent range. There are two kinds of self esteem there. Self esteem is an emotional function, and the two types are well being and confidence. And if you think about this, maybe in another venue, another talk between us, you'll understand and recognize self esteem can't just be being well fed and nourished and nurtured. It also has to have the ability to go out into the world, into the unknown, where there's risk, change, loss, and uncertainty, surely in life. We need confidence. Well, guess what? Well being being a self-esteem in which one feels well fed and nourished is maternal, but it's emotional. And so both females and males can have well-being and grant well-being to others, provide it to others. A male can be maternal. A female can also be paternal. And that's where confidence is given to the young, for example, or to a friend. It's the basis of friendship is mutual elevation of self-esteem. So if you have a confident friend and you are a maternal giving person as their friend, that's what you're trading. You're nourishing them. You're giving them comfort, support, things like this in the maternal nature, but not the instinctual nature. It's just maternal. It's nourishing. And your friend might provide you encouragement to grant you courage to go out into the world and be confident and face risk, change, loss, and uncertainty, which surely arrives at some point. So I think that's what Jung was seeing when he conceived of the ideas of the anima and animus. The animus being the male part of a female and the anima being the female part of a male. I don't think that's true at all. I just think that different people have certain gifts emotionally and are topped up on either more of a maternal nature, which I have, or more of a confident nature, which a coach or somebody who pushes you, or somebody in the military, like your drill sergeant in the military, pushes you, encourages you, wants you to do well on your own without them. And that is different. So I'm not talking about anima and animus and that kind of Jungian thing that I think is erroneous today. Now we know. So let's go to Hera. What is the nature of Hera if we draw right from the myths? And then we can learn about the nature of this instinct in females, which you could say is the mothering instinct, the automatic, intense, acting without thinking tendency in females on a bell curve. Center of the bell curve is the mean to nurture and mother others. In ancient Greek mythology, Hera is the queen of the gods in Mount Olympus. She rules as the goddess of marriage, women, family, and childbirth. She's the sister and wife of Zeus. In famous myths, known for her regal nature and her fierce, vengeful retaliation against Zeus's countless lovers and illegitimate children. Now, this doesn't have to be controversial either, because there's plenty of evolutionary psychology studies on the differences between males and females as far as uh, pursuing the opposite sex and um, the fact that males have billions of gametes over the lifetime. Evolution has pushed their behavior toward being attracted to many different women, whereas women with 200 to 300 total viable eggs over the lifespan, the reproductive lifespan, tend to be very automatically, remember, we're in the instincts here, we're not in conscious behavior, automatically very careful about choosing the right male to mate with. The domains of Hera are marriage, women, and childbirth. Symbols include the peacock, the cuckoo, cuckoo, and the cow, the pomegranate, and the lotus. Her children are Ares, the male god of war, which makes sense to me, and I'm going to explain in a moment. Hebe, the goddess of youth. Hephaestus, the goddess of, or the god of fire. But in my mind, Hephaestus is equivalent to something Barry and Seeger have not yet researched. I'm sure someday they will. Some point soon they'll research the Hera Instinct, I suspect. But right now they're on males, and that is good because males are really suffering right now. But Hephaestus was the god of technology and hard work. Um, I'm sure both males and females feel good about a job well done, hard work well done. But males almost have to have it to feel good about themselves. If they, I suppose, unless you're a Gen Z, Silicon Valley Titan, where you just discovered something, you got the right website, and then it blew up. Most males feel best when they have worked hard at something, and then there's some reward at the end of that. There's at least a legacy to others, to friends, children, family, and others. So that's Hephaestus. And he is a god of technology because he makes the weapons for the other gods, and he makes the tools for the other gods for them to be even able to use their best skills. And then finally, another child of Hera was Aletheia, the goddess of childbirth. So the drive to protect babies, maybe have babies, to feel a sense of completion um, in creating. Let's say creating. It doesn't literally have to be having children, having babies, but creativity, creating something. It could be gardening. It could be having a garden. Something organic is produced by you as a woman. Famous stories. She played a major role in the Trojan War, siding against Troy because Paris chose Aphrodite over her. And she also famously tormented the hero Hercules because he was one of Zeus's illegitimate sons. And there's a lot of literature about that too, about children who are your own biological offspring versus your stepchildren. There's a instinctual difference in treatment, whether you like it or not. Something to be aware of. Lots of studies there. So Hera is central. If I go back to the idea of human courtship and my model of it that you will find at romantopedia.com, those of you who are um, paid members, currently that's off. Everything is free for the next couple months. While we reconfigure things. But Romantopedia is where I have a 5,000 page compendium of human courtship in a logical order where you can learn and study and become acquainted with these models. Hera factors largely, and the stories about her mention that she was passed by Paris in choosing the fairest goddess, the best goddess, the most beautiful goddess, um, the most appealing goddess, let's say. And this formed the foundation of my interest in human courtship, getting into it. I was in the London National Gallery, approximately 2007, and I saw a painting by Tiwatel, the Dutch painter, of the Feast of the Gods. And the Feast of the Gods, to cut it short, the way that story went was Zeus and Hera, uh, the twin godhead of Mount Olympus, were going to throw a party for all the gods, except they didn't invite one goddess, who was Eris, the goddess of discord. You might imagine her as somebody with borderline personality disorder who would create utter chaos if were allowed into the party, um, or somebody who's narcissistic, let's say, and would just create strife. So the goddess of discord was not invited. So of course she is hurt by this and offended by this, and from the outside of the party, she rolls in a golden apple with the inscription on it, "For the fairest," knowing that this would cause jealousy and strife among the goddesses, among the females um, in the party. And three main female goddesses came into competition with each other at that point for this apple, this golden apple for the fairest. One was Hera, the wife of Zeus. The second was Aphrodite, the goddess of the feminine form and erotic love, passionate love, and beauty, the ultimate, most beautiful goddess. And then lastly, Artemis, or I'm sorry, Athena, the goddess of war, um, diplomacy and war. So these three are depicted in this painting, and all kinds of strife erupted at the party. So, of course, they go to Zeus, the CEO of Mount Olympus, and say, look, what are we going to do here? We've got a problem. These three goddesses are competing with each other for this apple. Could you make the decision who gets the apple? And Zeus is like, that's my wife, Hera. There's no way I'm going anywhere near that conflict to make the decision. Why don't we get a mortal, the most handsome, successful, youthful, masculine mortal on earth? And that would be Paris of Troy, the young prince of Troy. And so they solicited Paris to choose who is the fairest female, who is the best goddess, let's say. And that doesn't have to be the most beautiful. It has to be the most desirable, because we're in the area of the instincts. This is the area of desire and passion, not conscious moral thought, not boundaries, not emotions even, but just automatic instinctual responses to things, passionate responses to things. So Paris had to choose between these three. And ultimately, he chose Aphrodite, the goddess of beauty and the feminine form and the erotic, as the best. And each offered him a gift. Aphrodite's gift was the hand of Helen, the most beautiful mortal female in the world, who happened to be married to a Greek general, which is a problem. And the incipient event of the Trojan War, mythologically and possibly truly. But as I'm looking at this painting, I'm thinking, okay, we all know Helen of Troy was the face that launched 1,000 ships, right? She started the Trojan War with her beauty, and Paris absconded with her to Troy. But what about the other two goddesses? I thought they were offering something that was competitive, that didn't win in the end, but was definitely worthwhile and existed through human behavior in females toward males throughout all human history, because these stories have lasted. It's the Jungian concept of a story lasting. So Hera's gift offering to Paris was dominion over the world, ownership of property. So wealth, property, power, let's say, because she was married to Zeus. She was the female co-CEO of the entire universe. So she offered him power and property, ownership, very tempting, but doesn't trump beauty in the end, but very tempting. How about the third goddess in the contest? Athena, the goddess of war and winning. Now, this is the contraposed flip side to John Barry and Martin Seeger's uncovering of the second male instinctual tendency that they call archetypes, honoring Jung, but it's an instinct that I call the Aries instinct, son of Hera, which is interesting, to win, the male drive to win. That when males lose a sports game, when they lose an argument, when they are broken up with, divorced, they lose. when they are bankrupt, when they lose a job, they lose, they lose, they lose. It injures the Ares instinct, the god of war, which doesn't mean males have to be warlike. It means they want to achieve, they pursue a goal and want to achieve it. And that means they won. They won if they achieve a goal. It might not involve anybody else, it might not involve defeating another person, but they want to pursue goals and achieve and win. And these kinds of therapies, Barry and Seeger also point out in their textbook on male psychology, that the therapies that encourage males to pursue a goal successfully and try to win, maybe not actually win, but try, make males feel better and come out of depression and come out of anxiety. And these kinds of therapies work for males. It's for this reason. So Athena is a good name for a female power to judge. And this is actually what Athena did for battles. She would judge the winner. She she would not necessarily help the winner win. Sometimes she would, but ultimately she judged who is the fit winner from among the warring factions. And so there was a pursuit of her favor, of course. And the city of Athens is named after her for that reason, the center of original democracy. To win, it was Athena's gift, to win every battle, to win everything every time. Not necessarily given wealth, given property, just handed it over, and not beauty per se, but the feeling of being a winner. So I know I'm getting deep into, romantic theory, human courtship theory here, but it's one way for me to explain what is the function of these female instincts, which I like naming, giving a nomenclature from within the Greek mythology. It makes total sense. It's like a codex for decoding human behavior. In the same way that Shakespeare, his canon is a codex for decoding all the complexities of human emotion. But every Shakespearean play is based on one or two combined Greek myths together. Every single Shakespearean play is essentially beginning with a Greek myth and then expanding into Elizabethan times, or it suited their tastes to digest his material, his plays, his drama. So I see Shakespeare as the master of emotions, but Greeks or any analogous um, complete mythologic canon of human instinctual behavior, whether it's Chinese, Hindu, Greek, Roman, whatever you want to use, it's a codex for decoding it. It's where we should be looking. If we're going to prove that males have an instinct or archetype to provide, protect, I call that the Zeus. The second Barry and Seeger discovery was striving to win. I call that the Ares. It's the male god of war, whose sister was Athena, the female goddess of war, analogous, but operates differently, favors diplomacy over shock and awe attack. She strove for diplomacy first, probably why, the center of original democracy was Athens. And then their third uncovering was the male stoicism instinct, the drive to control one's own emotions as man, is their way of putting it. I just see that as being stoic. And the appropriate god, Greek god for that, is Hades, the god of the underworld, the god of going into your own deep workshop of the mind, if you will. your own privacy, your creativity as a male. That's the Hades instinct. But Hades also had a wife. So there's always a feminine equivalent to the masculine, a masculine equivalent to the feminine. They do similar instinctual automatic tasks that are inborn, but in a unique feminine way or masculine way. So, and that's why I'm convinced that Greek literature and the familial relationships between the deities, male versus female, brother, sister, husband, wife, mother, son, father, son, mother, daughter. These familial connections are a codex to female instinctual analogs to the male instincts and vice versa. And that's what Hera is to the Zeus. So it's the maternal instinct. So back to human courtship, when I'm looking at this painting, the Feast of the Gods, Tewaddle, in the British National Gallery, London, Trafalgar Square, to be exact, is where you can find it. I used to take intensive groups there. I would run classes in London and then take the classes there to actually see the painting. And it's striking. It eventually dawned on me that these three goddesses in the literature were the only three represented as the most powerful at attracting the ultimate mortal male. And so I figured those three must be three initial steps of human courtship in what we call sexual attraction or early dating or just attraction in general. So their three gifts are the most important. Beauty isn't just beauty, beauty is symmetry, which represents offspring viability evolutionarily, or health, just physical health is number one. Number two is offering the man the Hera gifts are maternal in nature. So when you see young lovers call each other baby, do they really mean an insult, like you act like a baby? Or do they mean something endearing, like how a father might care for, provide, and protect for a daughter, and how a mother might care for maternally a son and prefer him and favor him? And the phrase that I always found in these intensives that I ran for 15, 20 years, um, the most common comment that males have never heard from a female is a Hera natured phrase, and is the most powerful phrase that a male in potential romance could possibly hear. And it's the phrase, I believe in you. Males don't hear that from females. They absolutely don't hear it from the culture at large. And you see all kinds of news stories and blogs about this coming out now about how toxic masculinity is a misnomer and wrongful and bad and unhealthy for males to hear. And it's the exact opposite of what they would need to hear in the second step of human courtship within attraction, which is, I believe in you. And that's the ultimate statement of the Hera. It's the ultimate statement a mother would say to a favored son over all other boys. I favor you. I believe in you. You can fail and fail and fail repeatedly and try again, but I will believe in you no matter what, is the maternal instinctual nature ultimately. That's in romance, but that can apply within the workplace. It can apply within anywhere in a woman's life where she utilizes this instinct to organically grow what she wants to grow, whether it's a business, a garden, a house, a home, or a pet. I hear the dog barking. I better end now. So that's the Hera instinct. Thank you.